Welcome to the Take 92 podcast. My name is Sammy Warm Hands. I am your host, and today I am pleased to welcome my friend DJ Abilities from Rhymesayers Entertainment. I have known him for 11 or 12 years at this point, but this is the most I've ever just got to sit down and pick his brain about the creative process. And so we sat down over 2 days talking about all of the E&A records, rest in peace to Eyedea, and his rebirth as a solo artist. This is DJ Abilities.
Microphone check, 1, 2, what is this?
The 5-foot assassin with the roughneck business?
There you go. Correct. I just feel like that was a Jeopardy.
Yeah, I was like, man, am I being tested? I should answer.
No, but I'm glad you did.
I was trying to think of when I even saw you last. It must have been like Level Up, like 2 or 3 years ago.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Now, we know we don't have a ton of time, so I want to go through, this amazing career as fast as I can. With PHONOGRAPH PHOENIX, to me, the thing to talk about here is really your evolution as a producer. I'm curious, was it first turntablism or was it production that made you want to start making music?
I was a DJ first.
Yeah? Was there somebody that inspired you and made you think like, wow, I really want to try that?
DJ Excalibur.
Really?
He's an OG Minnesota DJ. Yeah.
Yeah.
I can remember, actually, mutual friend of ours, Carnage.
Yeah.
It was Carnage's DJ. I saw them both perform at First Avenue. I remember Carnage rapping about Yoda, and I thought that was really cool. And Excalibur was scratching, I believe, like the car screeching away noise off a DJ Rectangle album, I believe. And I remember being like, oh, and that's when I was like, at least one specific moment, there's no like all-encompassing moment, but that one is definitely one that I remember where I was like, oh, I want to scratch more.
Yeah.
Because it really resonated with me. So, yeah, I would say that.
Is it right that within 2 years you were already at the DMC finals nationally?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I started when I was 17, and when I was 19, I was at the finals, yeah.
Was there a feeling right away that was just like, oh, I understand how this works? Like, did it just came really quick?
It was. Yeah, because I think one of the reasons is, so when I was really young, I was fully ambidextrous.
Oh.
And then as I grew older, they split. So, like, I draw and I write with my left hand, but I play sports, like throw balls, etc. My stronger arm is my right arm, and my creative arm is my left arm, if you will. So when I sat down on turntables, the fader is a very like kind of mathematic thing.
Yeah.
And then the record is it's more artistic, like a paintbrush. So when I sat down on turntables, I was like, oh, my hands already do these things to a degree. So it was supernatural to me. And I really liked it, too, because I had tried all elements of hip-hop because I love hip-hop.
Yeah.
But that's the one that I enjoyed the most. And then I had the most aptitude to as well. So it wound up working out.
Yeah, that's cool that you just kind of had the natural skill set for that because, I've played music my whole life. And I remember a few years ago, I thought, I'm going to try and just do a couple of basic scratches on my record, and I was like, this is backwards, like... It's so...
It's like, really weird.
If you're used to, like, you hit the drum, you strum the guitar, and then you release the record, it's like, whoa.
You're hitting on one of the most gnarly elements of DJing. So there's a couple of things with DJing that makes it... With scratching, I should say, in particular. That makes it so abstract, which is... One, it goes backwards.
Yeah.
Right? So other music doesn't go backwards and forward. So that in of itself is really radical. 2, the smallest motions make the biggest noise. Like, if I go this to this, the sound that comes out of the speakers is going to be drastically different as opposed to if you hit the snare this hard or that hard.
Yeah.
It's just going to sound like a louder snare. Whereas when you're doing it with turntables, you can dramatically alter it. So therefore, it requires really, really precise control. And then the other thing, the third thing that's super gnarly about scratching, which is like, it's a deep one, is exactly what you're talking about previous, is every other instrument you need to make the motion to make the noise, right? And so for turntablism, it's always on. The key is always on. The horn is always playing because the turntable is already doing it for you. And that's where the concept of flaring comes in, because what transforming is it's like if it was drumming, because you're going dot, 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 and you're making that sound, dot, 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 dot.
Yeah.
But what flaring is the sound is on and you actually are playing negative space. So you're taking away sound as opposed to adding sound because you have the infinite sound on the turntable. And that's why scratching gets really fast.
Yeah.
Because once you learn how to do that, like we're one step ahead of every other instrument because we don't have to initiate the sound, so to speak. And then you get in situations where you're tearing the record and then you're cutting those tears in half, and then it just starts multiplying, and that's when it's like, like crazy fast. So it's cool. It's super gnarly. Like, I would consider myself more of a producer at this point in my life. Like, that's more interesting to me. But I still love scratching, and it's still fascinating to me. It's still one of my favorite instruments.
Yeah.
But it's just an instrument like a guitar or drums are at this point. Now it's more about all of them and making them all work together.
Absolutely. I've told people for years, like my guitar is a literal musical instrument. It's just a device to get the sound out of my head, like
it's just like a color. It's like blue isn't better than red, isn't better than orange, isn't better than green. It's just when you're making your painting, what is the right color for what you're trying to express?
Totally.
And instruments are the exact same way.
Yeah. Now, when you and Mike formed Sixth Sense, obviously he was also a prodigy in his way. Was there some kind of sense that when you were starting, like, dude, if you and me combine forces, like, this could be something special?
I think so. I don't think we looked at it in terms of, like, prodigies, you know what I mean? But I definitely think, in hindsight, I look at Mikey 100% as a prodigy.
Yeah.
I'm not going to look at myself in that way because that's just bizarre. But
well, I can say it.
I appreciate it. But I will say that it was this is a good team. You know what I'm saying? Like, we were excited to work together.
Yeah.
Because I think there was a mutual respect of skill. So, yeah, I definitely think that we felt good about the group. We could do some damage.
As Sixth Sense is becoming Eyedea and Abilities, I mean, how did you get reactions from the rest of the scene or from those early tours? I mean, deep philosophy, technical chops, I mean, all kinds of stuff that's really, really unique. Or was it more of a process before you guys kind of landed at your sound?
I think one of the reasons Mike and I worked well together is because we both were about advancing ourselves, and we both were open to doing it in many different ways. Like, one of the things I really liked about working with Mike is I could create any type of beat. I never felt like, I got to make this. I never felt limited working with him. So when I sat down to produce, it was like I literally could just make anything that I want because I knew he could do something to it. You know what I mean? Like, he has the technical skill to rap to any BPM of beat or any type of beat, and he had the mental depth to have any type of emotion or content. Yeah. So you're literally like the happiest of things, the saddest of things, from 60 BPM to 135 BPM, anything. One thing that I wish that him and I would have done, which I'm exploring now, is making songs in different time signatures. Yeah. That's one thing I wish I could have done with him because he would have been able to do it. And that's one of the only things I feel like we didn't get to explore that would have been rad.
Yeah, I think maybe the last thing that came out from him was that Sadistic song, and I want to say that was in 6/8.
I think. That's right. I remember that because I remember them talking about that. Being in an odd time signature. I wish I would have done it with Mike. I know he would have killed it. Oh, yeah. Yeah, you guys could have pushed that for sure. And speaking of your production being so varied, when I listened to Firstborn, I always felt like because what he's doing is so both thematically and lyrically dense, like there's a lot of space in the music on that record. And I wondered if that was
intentional that it was so stripped down? Like, was that a consideration for some of the stuff that he was bringing to the table, or was that just the style you were on at that moment?
We were super young.
Yeah.
So, like, it's simple because that's how I could make beats.
Yeah.
Like, I wasn't advanced enough. Like, if you start playing, you play the guitar. When you first start playing guitar, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
It's going to be simpler. So there was really no... At least I can't, if we're talking, this is 20 plus years ago, so
For
I don't
sure. Yeah.
truly remember. But if I was going to make a calculated guess, I know that I was trying to make dope stuff. So I think that's probably simpler more just because that's all I could do.
Yeah.
But I also think that on some level, whether consciously or subconsciously, I knew that Mike was super wordy and liked to use a lot of techniques and things. So if it started getting too busy, inherently that was going to detract.
Yeah.
So it's probably a combination of my aptitude as a producer and my understanding of him needing space. Because one thing that him and I always were in conjunction with is that we always understood that it was a collaboration.
Yeah.
And we never had issues with like, I want to do it this way. I want to do it this way. Like, we never had that. If one of us didn't like something, it was like, it's gone. We never argued over any type of stuff musically. We both had to appreciate it. Perfect example would be, I'll give you two different examples, and they're both by the throat because it's probably the most recent thing.
Yeah.
This story actually had a full chorus of him rapping.
Really?
And I was like, I don't like it. I think it sounds better instrumental.
Yeah.
And it was just like, boom. And then By the Throat actually had a scratch piece in it, and it didn't work. And it's just like, get rid of it. So there wasn't an ego thing involved. It was just like, what is the best that we can do? And I think it's because we both trusted one another that if one of us saw a fault in it, then it was probably right. And the other one of us just didn't realize it yet. You see what I'm saying?
Like, if we don't fix this now, we're going to be kicking ourselves in 6 months once it's out. Yeah,
exactly. And so we both understood that if one of us felt off about it, we were probably right.
Yeah.
That was one of the best things about working with him is that it felt very even. We had the same trajectory. We were on the same goal. There was no power struggles in regards to creating the music, which is pretty freaking cool when you think about it, because
it's a rare thing.
I think a lot of bands aren't like that, you know, where it is a lot of like, let's do it this way, let's do it that way. And I don't know, but I feel like it is that way. And I'm grateful that my band wasn't like that.
Yeah. I mean, I've had one band ever where everyone contributed equally, and pretty much the rest of the time, it's everyone looking at me going, all right, what do we do? So,
sure.
I mean,
which could be fun in its own way.
For sure.
But as long as you're the guy like directing the shit.
Yeah, but that kind of dynamic can really, mess with people's sense of belonging and their sense of control. And so, like you said, that equal partnership is just such a magic thing for the creative process, Now, I don't want to spend too much time on the old stuff. The last thing about Firstborn, coming off of DMC, Blaze Battle, you guys building this reputation, did you feel like there were expectations to deliver more of that style that you didn't really do much until the E&A record that was more in your face, more...
Yeah, not to cut you off, but I feel like I hear where you're going. I think in our first record, we just kind of did what we wanted to do, and it's the songs that we had. And I think the Firstborn record is very Minnesota winter-like. It's very, very inside and cerebral, and like, I think that the E&A record actually is a response to some degree to people being like, where is the battle rap? Where is that kind of stuff?
Yeah.
And, at that point, we're still 20, 22 or something, or still young people. So I think we were kind of swayed to do some more of that stuff. Plus, we did like doing that stuff. So it wasn't like this big reach. It was like, well, let's do some more battle shit. And so I guess that's why that is like that. That's why it progressed that way. It wasn't really... Firstborn being the way that it wasn't necessarily a conscious thing. Although, Mikey does talk about it on the Before and After song with Blueprint, where he's like, I don't need to rap about battling, I do it.
Yeah.
That's pretty tough, in my opinion.
That's a hard line.
Pretty tough to say. Yeah, big time. Particularly when you win back, too. It's not just like battling to battle. It's like he's winning these battles.
Yeah.
So he's like, I don't even need to do it anymore. It's like kind of extra boss when you think about it.
Yeah, like, you really need me to flex? What do I have to prove?
Exactly. And even on ENA, it's not really battle raps. Like, outside of Star Destroyer kind of is a battle song. I'll say that that's kind of a battle song.
Yeah, or Capped or
like,
ENA Day.
Yeah, but ENA Day is more, it's not like other rappers per se.
For sure.
ENA Day is more like battling expectations in the industry to a degree.
Yeah.
Kept is more about, I'm just dope. It's not necessarily battle. It's more like, I get busy. Kind of like 120 is kind of that too.
Yeah.
But 120 is more of like our like symbiotic relationship. 120 kind of has that going. But really, like, Star Destroyer is the one that's really, but even that is like done in a metaphor of like planets and stars, you know? So like when you think about it, is there just a traditional like rap battle song on there? Like, not really. Before and After and Blindly Firing are the most battle rap songs that we've ever done. And those were both on Firstborn, because I would make a strong case that the ones on ENA are, but with more. They're like, there's more to them than just that. Like fusion, battle rap fusion, if you will. And then By the Throat definitely doesn't have any battle rapping on it. That's a whole different beast in its own right.
For sure. Well, before we dive too far into ENA, let me switch gears for a second, because the Anti-album from Semi-Official is, I think, some of your best work as a producer. You know, it's a totally different lane. You're doing much more almost East Coast inspired kind of boom bap, like really sample heavy. It seemed like kind of a real big pivot from Firstborn. It kind of bridges the gap to what you guys were doing with ENA, but how long did that album take in production? Because, like you were saying, the skill level at Firstborn versus where you were at with that only, I think, 2 years later, it's a really big leap.
But that's not all me. Basically, he's an avid record collector.
Oh.
And so he's been collecting records, I don't know how long, but he's really into crate digging. So he approached me about, do you want to make this record with me? And I was like, sure. I've always been a big fan of his. So I was like, yeah. And he's going to bring me all these awesome records. So a huge part of that is because he's bringing samples to me and that he wants. And he's like, I like this.
Okay.
Let's flip this. And then I'm technically making it happen. So I wouldn't say I made that record. I would say we made that record together. Even though I technically did everything, he still brought the sound and had a strong idea of what he wanted. And then I helped get it to that space. And then through that process, we found new things as well, where it was like, oh, this is cool. Because you could think, oh, I want to use this, and it just doesn't work. And then you have to pivot and go a different way. And then some of them, like Crime, that was just a beat I had.
Oh, really?
That one I did on my own, and then I-94 I did on my own. And then the intro I did on my own, the scratch intro thing. But the difference between that and ENA is definitely him, like his presence and him bringing those samples. And that's why it's more sample-based, because he was like, I want to loop this. You know?
Yeah.
Like, you know, he brought Gray, and it's just like a loop. And like, okay. That one was hard to loop, though, actually, because I had to chop it in bizarre ways and make it all work. But it was cool. Like, that record still has it's unique. I'm grateful to have done that record.
Yeah, I mean, those are some really fun collaborations. I've done that a lot of times where if it exceeds my skill level and I know there's a potential in a sample, I'll bring that to somebody else and be like, yo, what do you think you could do with this and flip this, you know, and have come up with some really cool stuff that way. Going back to ENA, which came out, I think, just 6 months later, I was blown away when that record came out because with the first track, Reintroducing, you have scratching of the lead vocal within the verse, not after the verse in the scratch hook or something like that. And I know I've said this to you before, but to this day, I don't understand, like, what was the vocal phrasing originally? How did he leave space for you to do that? Like, how was this track conceived that you guys were like, you know what would be cool? Okay, but how do we do it, right?
Sure. Well, that's right when CDJs were brand spanking new.
Yeah.
Right? So it was like, oh, you can take anything and scratch it immediately. And so the reason why that song works is because we wrote it together. He literally rapped part of it, and then we would work out, okay, well then how would it be? Then we would record him rapping that. We would press a CD of him rapping. Then we put it in the CDJ. I would scratch it, and then we would proceed and go to the next part and the next part. So that would be cool if we still had each one of those CDs. I'm sure those are long gone. But like, just had the different burn CDs of each line that would be pretty rad.
That's
yeah,
great.
That's how we did it.
That's like some Beastie Boys stuff where they got to integrate the trade-offs within each line, you know?
Yeah. Like to have to stop and like burn a CD, that was pretty fun.
Yeah, man.
Like, okay, and then put it in, and like it was cool. Like that's definitely one of the cooler things I think we've done, because it's so different sounding than really most things that are out there. It's
I mean,
bizarre.
that's...
And the beat too is like, I was pretty pumped on that beat because it's like super simple.
Yeah.
It's just that this is the kick, the snare, and that click. But then it's got that like bass line that's like absurdly complicated for one bar. You know, one bar, it's just like, here's where all your notes are, and now it's back to nothing. And I thought that created a really cool contrast. And then I thought that having it that sparse was really smart, because then it really emphasized I'm scratching his voice. You know, there wasn't any other melodies or anything else. You only were focusing on that's what was happening. But then you were still satisfied, like when that one bar came in with all the notes, to give it enough of a musical, to get the notes in the song. So I really like that. Plus, I really enjoyed, as a huge Tribe Called Quest fan, like Midnight Marauders and Low End Theory were really, really big as far as me falling in love with hip hop. So having the EA, being able to put the E and A from those records, or I guess that would be just from Midnight Marauders, but getting to put that in there, I was really happy to be able to put that in there. I was like, this is probably the best E and A I could have found. Like, from Midnight Marauders, like, what's better than that? Like, it sounds amazing. And then anybody who knows where it's from, it's just like an instant, like, that's dope. You know what I mean? So
it just lays down the gauntlet. I mean, I was in high school when that came out, and I remember, you know, I'd be driving around, and I just always had that CD in the car. And so if I had a friend come in and we were going someplace, I'd be like, oh, man, let me put this on. You've never heard anyone do this before. You know, like, and on a certain level, you said CDJs were so new, and it's true. But it was kind of history. Like, have you heard people do that prior to you? Because I haven't.
I don't think so. I mean, but that doesn't mean it hasn't happened. But I haven't heard it.
I haven't either.
Like, and I think that one of the reasons probably is, you know, unfortunately, DJ and MC continuity and like collaboration is kind of rare.
Yeah.
And I think that's probably one of the reasons, you know, if maybe Glue has done it somewhere. Like, that's one of the only groups I know that really integrate the DJ within their group. I don't think they ever did that, though. But that would be like the first group I would think off the top of my head that may have. Funny enough, I did like a very simplified version of that on a Gym Class Heroes song.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I'm friends with Travi, and he had this song about, I don't really remember exactly what it was, but I wound up scratching his voice during the song. It was more like just like a really cool glitch effect. Yeah. As opposed to like, me and Mike's really was boom, boom, boom. But that's because we wrote it together. Whereas with that song, he had left me some space. And it sounds really cool. It actually is dope. But it's not the same, obviously. Yeah. But I guess that's the only thing I can think about, but I did it.
Yeah. So I've got to respect your time here. I'm going to move forward here to By the Throat. This record is obviously, you know, a big twist, a curveball in a way. In what you were saying about working with iSelf, was this a more collaborative record in terms of production? Because it definitely also shares some similarities to the changes that Mike was making in, you know, his Crush Kill stuff at the time. And yeah, I'm just curious, like, how you guys arrived at that sound, because it's a very unique sounding album, and it's super melodic.
Absolutely. The By the Throat thing is actually pretty cool. So Mike and I had broken up for a little while. Yeah. But we were still friends. So it wasn't like, it didn't erode, you know, we just stopped making music together. So we got offered to do a show, this 2-day festival. One of the days was Naughty by Nature.
Wow.
One of the days was us, right, at First Avenue. And it was a lot of money. And like I said, we were still friends. So it was like, let's just do this. Why not, right?
Yeah.
So we do that. He comes over to rehearse. And I forget which one of us said maybe we should try something new, or I don't remember exactly how that happened.
Mm-hmm.
But it did. And I had this one beat, because I was really focusing on turntablism at the time.
Yeah.
But I had this one beat that I had tried to give to Blueprint at one point, and I tried to give to Sage at one point. But this was before, at least I knew how to send shit through the internet, right? Like I wasn't on that level yet. So for whatever reason, I don't remember, but I was unable to give it to either of those two people who I had discussed giving the beat to.
Yeah.
And so I still had this beat that I was like, this is like the one beat that I really like, because I've just been doing scratching. And that beat wound up being Burn Fetish. So I played him the beat because Burn Fetish was a Carbon Carousel song. And so he just started spitting that verse over that beat.
Okay.
And we both were like, oh, this sounds pretty good. You know?
Yeah.
and so we did that at the show, and everybody was really into it. And so that's really why we decided to make the next record, because it just naturally happened, which is kind of perfect because that's how we became a group. It just kind of happened. But it's kind of funny to me because 2 different times that beat should have been somebody else's.
Yeah.
And so I'm not like a meant to be guy, but then things happen like that where you're like, well, maybe though, right?
Yeah.
So, and the thing is, it works so, because Mikey always wrote to beats. He wasn't really one of those guys that would, I'm sure he did it at times, but it was always more, here's the beat, I'm going to write to the beat, so it specifically matched emotion, cadence, etc. That's why it works, right?
Yeah.
Plus, I think I'll go out on a limb here and say he liked getting the beats so he could explore those beats. He didn't want to have, he enjoyed that process. But that's why it's so amazing how good Burn Fetish sounds, because it works perfectly. Like
almost in spite of that. Yeah.
That's one of my favorite E&A songs.
Oh, yeah.
I still play that at my shows. Like Burn Fetish is one of the songs I will always play because it just works. So it's interesting that it was already previously existing. So to answer your question, though, outside, I guess, of that one, once we realized that we wanted to do more stuff together again, I had heard his rock band stuff, the Carbon Carousel. And I liked it. I thought it was dope. But obviously I wasn't going to do that. Like that was that. So, but I knew how deep he was into rock. And I loved rock. Like I grew up listening to Metallica, Alice in Chains, Nirvana. Like I loved rock music as well. So it wasn't some crazy stretch for me to use guitars. I enjoyed that sound too. So ultimately, though, I made that sound thinking about Carbon Carousel. It's like, okay, so how do I take this energy that he likes, but make it E&A, and that will be our next sound?
Yeah.
And when I started making all the beats, that was what I was envisioning. And then I went to his house, and I played him all the stuff, and then we picked the ones that we liked, because there were ones that he didn't like, that he was like, no. And like I said to you before, there was never any weirdness. It was like, which ones do you like? Which ones don't you like? He picked the ones that he liked, and then he took them, and then he proceeded to add to them. Like, Smile would be a good one. Like, he added the guitar over the top. I think that one is the one he really shined on. Like, that guitar add over the top brings it way to the next level, and he added, like, the little drum roll that gives it like a little bit of a syncopation to it. But then on the flip side, to talk about how collaborative him and I were, so he added all of that, but then he was really open to me to dictating how cadence should be. So the reason why Smile goes, he's just rapping simple, and then on that 4th bar, it's like bouncy. I was like, I want to hear that. That's how you should do the verse. And he was like, okay, I'll do that. Same thing with like on Now, where it's like, free us that we can see, that very last chant.
Yeah.
That was me. I was like, do this chant, and like fill in the words, whatever you want. But I was like, this is the rhythm that it should be. So it really was, it was so collaborative. It really was nice. And again, no ego. So here's another example of just, we were about how good can it be?
Yeah.
So on By the Throat, I had the drums. That whole sample, more or less, I probably shouldn't say this, but whatever I'm going to say, is a Death Wish sample from the movie Death Wish, the soundtrack. And those drums are like super pitched low, and there was a sample in there that I cut, and it had that real deep emotion, but this kind of that simple up top low, like boom boom, right? And so it had that feel to it, and I really liked it. Like it was super dope. And then when I came back to his house and he played me what Jeremy had done,
Jeremy
his guitar player
Oversocker
from Carbon Carousel, and it was funny because not to just keep harping on this, but again, we both had to agree.
Yeah.
Right. So if one of us was like no, then we wouldn't use it. So he's playing it for me, and somewhere inside he was like, I hope we get to use it. I hope we get to use it. You know what I mean? So I'm listening to it because again, he took out my whole sample chops, only kept the drums. Took out all the sample chops, but he kept the feeling. And it was so funny because when I heard it, I mean, I don't even know how many seconds in, but I was like, oh, we're using that.
Yeah.
I was like, we're using that version. Like, there's no way we're not using that. And then he just started laughing, and he was just like, yes, because I think he was concerned that I might have wanted to keep the chops, because the chops did sound good. But, I mean, that guitar.
Oh, yeah,
I mean,
he's great.
That shit is massive. And then he added the Moog. It sounds so good. So yeah, that record really was collaborative in that way, where it was a lot more give and take. Again, all the beats were present, but then he would add, and then I would be like, yes, no, maybe we'll do this. And then also on some of them were kind of built from the ground up, because actually this story was built from the ground up.
Really?
Because I had that guitar sample that the controller won, this Vestex turntable that had the pitch where you could change the pitches.
Yeah.
And if I remember correctly, I had that riffed, and I think we made that more or less together at his studio from the ground up. And then, you know what? We did do one song that was a little bit out of time, because on Spin Cycle, that's a 5-bar loop.
Yeah.
So there was one that I did get one weird one with him. So that's cool.
Last thing on By the Throat, I want to talk about the turntable style, because when I met you guys, the first thing that we really talked about, me and Mike, was production. And he was asking me about the live band, how we worked. And he's like, oh, man, I just did the same thing. Like, I just one-taked all the vocals on this record because I didn't want to overproduce it. You know, he's like, I just lit a candle,
in one day,
bottle of wine. Yeah, he's like,
correct.
I just ran through everything and just kept it, try to get it to feel live. And your approach on that record feels almost more guitar solo-y. It's more melodic. It's a little more chaotic or noisy. Was that something you guys approached together of like, you know what, let's strip down a little bit. Let's not be so over the top with our, patterns. Let's just see what happens, kind of. I mean, was there a looser structure in your mind as well?
I don't think either of us really thought as technical about it as people may think.
Yeah.
We more were just like, let's do something that's tight. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so if it wound up being simpler, it was simpler. If it was more complicated, it was more complicated. I do think on some level, if there was a conscious thing, there was a level of scratching like more guitar sounds to
yeah.
Well, and I'll throw this back. The whole sound of the record was a conscious thing.
Yeah.
Like I said, I was like, I'm going to bridge E&A and Carbon Carousel, and that's the sound we're going to go with. All these other things you're talking about, where it's like, I don't necessarily think that they were strategized as much.
Sure, but I mean, you're not sampling vocal chops and things like that on this record
because it didn't make sense.
Yeah,
you know what I'm saying? It's like, I mean, I guess on Spin Cycle I could have been scratching somebody saying spinning or something. You know what I mean? But it made a lot more sense to scratch guitar notes.
Yeah,
to go with the guitars, and I think too, though, that was a natural progression of, because I had that controller one, I was already thinking more in terms of scratching melodically.
Yeah.
Like that was exciting at the time. So I think the two things just merged realistically in a natural way.
Yeah. I really just have one more follow-up to that. You and I met on that tour. I don't know how much you remember, but it was pretty insane for us, just in that, I strike up this conversation with Mike. Well, he introduced himself to me. We're talking for a while. I give him a CD. we walk into the main room before doors open, and you and Gabe, Webb the Free Range Human, are chatting as well. Mike gives you our CD, and I've never seen anybody do something like this. You opened it, you walked up on stage, put on your headphones. As the doors are opening and people are coming in, you're sitting on stage with low lighting, listening to our CD after talking to this dude about his beat making process that you had never met before. Do you remember that at all?
I do, yeah. It was a good night. It was at Wow Hall, right?
Yeah, it was. It was.
Yeah.
And, being that night that you invited him maybe an hour later to remix the record, and I remember you popping your head in the green room saying to Mike, hey, do you still have the acapellas? I want you to send them to Gabe. And I was like, wait, what just happened? What do you remember about that conversation with him and what stood out as like, wow, I see something cool? Because, I mean, obviously you meet musicians every night. I mean, on the road, like.
You'd think so, yeah. I don't know. I mean, I think it's probably a combination of, it's a long time ago. Obviously, I don't remember. It was a good conversation. I remember having a good conversation with him, and I think that I was in a good mood. You know what I mean? So it was like, when those two things intersect, then those type of things happen. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because I think it required both for me to be in that space. And yeah, I just think it was an interesting night, though. I think too, it's like, it was unique. I haven't done that since in that way. So I just think it was a cool, stars aligned kind of situation is what I would say. Yeah, definitely.
And that re-inspired us, because at the time we both came out of projects that we thought were going to take us further and didn't. And so that was kind of that was like our fuck it band. We really didn't care about that project at all. We were just fucking around. And then, when you guys came.
That's probably why it was good, though, because once you eliminate ulterior motives, you guys were just having fun, and that's probably why it works, because at the end of the day, I think, when you're creating art on any level, you're tapping into playing and having fun. It's like that has to be attached to that. No matter how deep you're going, I feel like on some level you're still playing to a degree, at least a lot of the time. I'm not going to sit here and say that's the blanket of all art creation.
For sure,
but I think a lot of times I think that is what it is. I know for me personally, I have a mantra that I use frequently, which is called follow the fun. And so when I'm putting my sets together or when I'm creating, if I'm stuck, that's what it is. Follow the fun. What feels fun, that's probably what's going to be right.
Yeah.
Because inherently I'm always trying to make it technical and wild and gnarly, and like that can dampen the fun. Then it just turns into, I don't know, something that's not enjoyable to listen to. So I think one of the reasons why that project probably worked for you guys was specifically because you didn't have attachments to it outside of just having fun.
Yeah, absolutely. Not a lot of people probably know about that project, but if you go to the Michael Larson Bandcamp, you can hear the By the Throat remixes, which obviously overseen by you personally. Mike had redone This Story.
Yeah,
right,
that's the one I really remember.
Right before we lost him. Yeah, and that was amazing, man. Him coming with that live energy.
Well, because also Webb sampled the beat. He took the instrumental and changed it, and then Mike took his lyrics and changed it. So it was cool. It was a cool process.
Yeah. And I remember seeing you only a year or two later out there with Atmosphere. It was my first time seeing you solo. How much had you done as a solo artist up until that point?
Not much at all. That's one of the reasons it's taken me so long to come out with this new album.
Yeah.
Because when Mikey had passed, I wasn't prepared to perform shows by myself. I was always in a group setting. I mean, I did DJ sets early on when I was young.
Yeah.
But that was nothing that I could tour nationally. That was just me learning how to DJ or whatnot. So the years preceding Mikey's passing was primarily figuring out how can I perform by myself purely as a job. Like, it was just a survival thing. Like, I need to be able to do shows to make money for myself and my family. So I wasn't able to create new music because I had to make sure my show was good enough so I could get booked. And that was the first couple years of that. And I got to a space where I felt really good about my live show and things were going well, but I wasn't progressing as far as I had wanted to be. Mm-hmm. People want to hear my beats, they want to hear my scratching, they want to hear my original music. Totally. And so I opened up Ableton, and I actually labeled the session The First Step, because it was the first step towards making the record. Nice. Which I felt was my the thing that I had to do to get back to where I want to go and beyond. And funny enough, that actually is the first step on Phonograph Phoenix. Like, it was the first song, the first step, and it wound up making the record as the first song on my record, which blows my fucking mind because, I mean, I worked on that thing over the course of, I think, 7 years from beginning to end. Like, I had to constantly stop and start, and it took me a long, long time to figure out how to do it by myself. Like, many times I thought about just quitting and getting vocalists. Yeah. Because filling up all that space was way more difficult than I anticipated it being. Plus, no samples, writing all the music myself. It took a long fucking time. But I knew that if I went through that process, the next one wouldn't take as much time. Like, a huge amount of that time was only figuring out how to do it. Yeah. But it still blows my mind that the first step actually is the first step. Yeah, like, that's pretty perfect. When I decided I was going to make my new record, that song is it. Like, out of all the songs I made that didn't make it, that one is the first one, and it is the first step. And that's crazy to me. And I do want to talk about that song in particular, but I want to talk about this period a little bit too, because I remember when we did the tour for the documentary in 2016, I mean, obviously, I'm sure a lot of mixed feelings because of, you're having to watch that damn footage every night and hear those songs every night, but those fans were the most gracious, supportive, loving fans. Was that at all cathartic to go out there and play for those particular crowds who were like really, really bought in and seeing what E&A still meant to people over that time? Yeah, of course. But I guess I feel that way. It might have been turned up more because of the documentary, but I feel that way every time I play. Yeah. Like, there's always a lot of E&A fans there, so it wasn't that different than how my normal shows are, to be completely honest. Sans playing the movie every night, which was awesome, but also difficult, as you had previously said. There was a lot of emotion involved in that. But as far as the love from the crowd, it's always like that. There's always going to be E&A fans who are always ride or die. I mean, when I drop in Burn Fetish or Now or Smile, it goes way up. Yeah. And it's really awesome. And on that tour was the first time that Terrell and I got to hear some of these new songs. Sure. When I was working on them. The beginning phases or whatnot. The thing that stood out to me most is that I really hadn't heard, kind of like you alluded to here, that you are communicating theme throughout the record without a vocalist. And I hadn't quite heard anyone do it in such an effective way where you'll only use, maybe 3 lines at most through a whole song, There are actually a lot of samples on each song. It's just that they all pertain to the same theme. Yeah. So it feels like it's cohesive. One day I'm going to go through and I'm going to listen to, because a previous interview I did a little while ago was talking about the amount of samples. Mm-hmm. And I'm curious actually to see how many I actually did scratch on each song. Yeah. Because in this previous interview I've said, and I was kind of exaggerating to a degree, but I was like 30 or 40 a song. But then I also started thinking, like, how many actually is it? Yeah. And someday I'm going to go and listen to all the songs and find out how many it is. And I think actually one of the reasons why I thought it was so many is because I scratched an absurd amount of samples for each song. but they all didn't make the song.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
so the process was a shit ton, but then I picked the best ones and placed them. But even with the best ones, it's still a lot. Like some there's less, some songs are less, some are more. The first step has a lot of them in it. Waves, not so much, because Waves is just kind of more of a feeling.
Yeah.
But that still has a good amount. And yeah, it'd be interesting to see the count. One day, one bored afternoon, I'm just going to go out. I'm going to go and I'm just going to tally them up and see how many different scratch samples did I use.
Yeah, you should do a lyrical breakdown or something for us. But that first song, the first step, so it opens with these fat, like firstborn drums, but the first sound you hear is that sample out of the bottomless pit. It's just so perfect. Like, did that just fucking hit you, or were you like digging and digging to find like the right thing?
This is a long time ago, but I know that because I know it still hits me to the level of where like I'm like that shit is perfect.
Yeah,
you know, like
yeah,
because it's like out of the bottomless, and then it hits with the kick, and it's just like it works perfectly. So I don't fully recall finding it how I felt when I found that. But knowing how I still feel about it, I can guarantee I was like, oh, yeah, this is going to work.
Yeah, yeah. And I also just like the way, I mean, you mentioned where it hits. If I'm remembering it correctly, your timing of that line is used differently than the original in the way that it lands on that final kick.
Honestly, I don't know. It might. I'm not sure. I can't say one way or the other, but it wouldn't surprise me. Because
yeah.
Ultimately, whenever I use a sample or a vocal sample, it's bound to change more than likely on some level.
Yeah.
That one works really good. It really sets the tone of the album. Like,
yeah,
with a title called Phonograph Phoenix, you know, about me coming back, having that be just the first line, like, there's no confusion. You know, right when you press play, it's like, this is what we're in for.
Yeah.
And I like that.
I think in some ways this is probably your most autobiographical album because you're not having
it easily is.
Someone else speak for you this time.
It easily is because as much as Mike and I's records, I poured myself into them, it's still a collaboration. And with him being a vocalist and being a freaking amazing vocalist, the Eyedea records are 50-50 at best, if not more Mikey. You know what I mean? Realistically. So this record is all me. So, of course, yeah, this record has more of me because it's just me.
Yeah.
It has to be. You know what I mean?
I liken this a little bit to Blueprint's album, Adventures in Counterculture, where he was like, all right, I'm done sampling. I've got to figure out how I'm going to play all this shit.
And sing. He's singing, too, which is ill.
Yeah.
A new challenge.
What did that process look like for you? I mean, did you have any specific inspiration that you took of like, oh, you know, I see X, Y, and Z are playing their own parts like this, makes me want to do that? Or was that just kind of out of necessity of like, all right, if I'm going to start dropping shit as a solo artist, I need to watch out for samples and copyrights? And
there's a handful of things. So one, when I decided to do this, and do it completely solely, one of the reasons was because I was like, at worst, I'll be better. Because it's such a challenge that if I can overcome this challenge, I'll be a better musician no matter what, having to figure out how to write everything. So that was really appealing to me. The fact that Ableton came out with the Ableton Push, which it was brand new at the time, that had the feature where you could make all the pads be in the correct key.
Oh.
Because I'm not musically trained at all, so that made me think, I'll at least know theoretically it's correct. Because when I used to try to play on piano, I could land some things, but a lot of the times what would wind up happening is I'd be like, there's something wrong and I don't know what it is. And it would be like one note without a key or something, but I couldn't figure it out, and it was frustrating and exceptionally time-consuming. Whereas when the Ableton Push came out, and I could just know everything was correct theoretically. It just came down to, does it sound good?
Yeah.
Because I'm not hitting the wrong notes. That was another reason where I was like, okay, this might be possible. And that was kind of at the very beginning phase. And then researching and learning more about theory and stuff, that it grew from that. But I know that specifically was one of the reasons I thought that it was even possible to not use samples. Another was because VSTs sound good now.
Yeah.
To me, they didn't sound good for years and years and years, but they do sound good now. Two, I knew that I was going to get it mixed and mastered super properly so that it would sound good too, which can mask kind of the computer beat sound if you're putting it through real gear, real board, real analog stuff to give it more of a, more organic feel.
Yeah. At this point, it's been about 12 years since By the Throat. Because, I mean, I heard what sounded like basically finished songs 5 years ago, and you're still chipping away going like, no, they can be better, right? I mean, was there a pressure on yourself? Like, whatever this first drop is, it's got to be awesome because, you know, it's a debut for a veteran, you know? Like, people know you.
Yeah, I'm in a weird middle ground of like, I'm known, but it is a debut. And that's interesting that you say that because I definitely agree with that. So years ago, I was at a place where I was like, I'll quit doing this and I'll do something else. But I was like, I should at least try the hardest that I can before I move on to something else. And so kind of where I'm at is like, if people like this, I'm going to keep going.
Yeah.
If they don't, I'll do something else. But I was like, I owe it to myself to try as hard as I possibly can. And so that is why it took a long, long time, because I was like, it's a big deal. There's more weight on this than just a regular record. So I really wanted to make sure it was awesome. But that said, that's just how I felt about all the ENA records too. Like, I never don't want to do my best either.
Yeah.
But I think maybe part of the reason I took all the extra steps was because of the extra weight that was put on this, given all of the circumstances. So, yeah, I did my best. It's kind of silly to say in a way. I guess kind of cliche maybe, or after school specially, but like, I did my best. That's all you can do, and I hope that people like it. But I can't think of anything else I could have done better. You know, like after the fact, there's little things where I'm like, oh, I would turn that up or that down, or I may have changed that. But more or less, it's pretty much exactly the best I could make it be. And you know, what else can you ask for? That's all I can do.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I always have that kind of approach when I release a record at this age anyway, that if this is the last thing that I ever drop, right? You know, and so I kind of put that of like, all right, we've got to meet this level if I'm going to be satisfied to put this out, you know. You did put on a tribute to Michael using some of his voice, the Skydiver, Black Hole at the Center of Our Galaxy, We're Still Suffering, We're Still Aching. Mm-hmm. And I believe there's another one from Burn Fetish in there, but
there's a couple in there, yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure that was an important thing to acknowledge him with this record. Do you remember anything about that process?
Absolutely, because that was the last song that I made, because I knew how emotionally taxing it was going to be. But I knew I had to do it. There was no way I couldn't have a song honoring Mike on my record. Like, there's no way I could not do that. So it was tough. I didn't want to go through it because I knew how tough it was going to be. So I started with the guitar patch, which is a really nice patch. Case in point, when I was talking about VSTs, like, to me, that just sounds like a dope guitar.
It does.
Like, it's just a VST, but it's not quantized. So I think that gives it, and the velocity sensitive, so it feels like it has more of an organic feel to it.
Yeah.
I knew that, and I don't want to get emotional here, but when I wrote the original riff, I was like, if I don't cry when I write the riff for this song, it's not good enough.
Yeah.
I have to hit that level of emotion. I have to tap into that.
Yeah.
So I wrote that guitar line, which I did cry while I was writing, and I was like, okay, I got it. Like, that's going to work. And then I had the drums, but it was just so brutally depressing.
Yeah.
Because it was just the guitar and the drums, and I was like, I don't want to have that. That just doesn't feel like it's helping anybody.
Yeah.
That may be me because it's giving me some kind of release, but for the listeners, I was like, I just didn't want it to be that depressing. Mm-hmm. So I was like, how can I turn this and make it uplifting as well? So it starts with the line from Skydiver, which is Black Hole at Center of Our Galaxy, We're Still Suffering, We're Still Aching, which is us, right? All of the friends, family, fans we miss Mike still.
Yeah.
Then it goes to the middle, which is shoot a hole in the sky, rip it open, climb inside. And that's where the guitar gets bright and uplifting. And that's like Mike elevating to the next plane or whatnot, or his memory or the positivity of him. And then it drops back down into where I currently am at, which is I try to maintain. Day by day, I keep moving forward.
Yeah.
And so the best that I could using scratch sounds and instruments, I tried to, at least on a small level, tell the journey. I'm pretty proud of that song. I think, again, it was the best that I could do.
It's very effective.
I don't know how else I could have done that better.
It's very effective. It really is, yeah.
Awesome.
It hits every time. To wrap this up here, I wanted to ask a question in terms of run time, because a trend that I've noticed as I went through each one of these albums that we've talked about here is that each one is shorter than the last one.
Sure.
And coming from punk rock, I like that because I always feel the immediacy, right? I want it to be to the point. I don't want an 8 or 16 bar intro. I want the guy to start rapping, right? And so there's a quality specifically about this one and By the Throat where they're just very direct approaches that leave you wanting more. Is that a conscious decision on your part, or is it just sort of like when it feels like it's done, it's done?
I think it's a little of both because... And I've always been this way ever since First Born, and then it's gotten more amplified throughout the years of I don't want to have songs that are redundant.
Yeah.
So I'm always expressing different sounds, different keys, different BPMs. So each sound and each song has its own energy. And every song is my favorite song. That's why it made. I have other songs that didn't make that record that I could put out, but I didn't like them. I didn't cherish them like I like like that I love all these songs. Every song on there, I love. That's why they're on there. So rather than have the record longer, but with the song that's not quite as good as those 8, that's like, why? And you know what? I'm going to just make it simple. Quality over quantity.
Yeah.
That's how I ride. I don't even really need to elaborate anymore. Quality over quantity, dude. Every day. I'm
with you there. For me, I know when an album's done based on the sequencing. Because if I have a batch of songs and I'm kind of aligning, okay, I know I want to start with this, I want to close with this, and you're kind of figuring out, okay, which flows in and out of each other really well, which contrasts and complements, right? You can sort of feel like these pieces might need some more glue. There might need to be something.
Or you need a more energetic song, or you need a sadder song. Absolutely. But see, this is one of the things, though, about and this goes back again to the Eyedea days, I don't make songs and complete them. I work on the whole record at the same time. So it's like I'll have 60% of this song, 70% of that song, 80% of that song, because I'm trying to look at it as a whole thing. And then kind of what you're talking about, the sequencing, once I get the sequencing where I'm like, okay, I have enough of all the feelings that I want, enough of all the BPMs and everything that I want, where it becomes one cohesive thing, then I go in and finish it all. Because to me, it's not a song. It's one song.
Yeah.
And that's another reason why the record isn't really that long, quote unquote, because I thought about it in terms of vinyl. That record actually is 2 sides. It's specific. There's a beginning, a middle, and an end. And the sequencing of each side is very specific to where when you put the needle on, it has an intro feel to it. It has a middle feel to it. It has a definitive ending feel to it. And then even on the first side of PHONOGRAPH PHOENIX, it has an end to it, but it also has a lead in. You want the next thing to happen. So it's one piece. It's a painting. It's one painting.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? It's one painting. It's all got to work together. You have this part, you have this part, you have this part. But when you look at the whole thing, it all needs to make sense. So I'm not just going to add more colors just to add more colors if it doesn't help the painting. Do you know what I mean? And also, it's there's so much media to consume.
Yep.
No filler. One of the things I love about my record is it's just this is what I got. I'm not it's not long-winded. You know what I mean? It's I already trimmed all the fat for you guys as listeners. Like, this is what I got.
Yeah.
And if you think it's kind of short, okay, I guess. But I've never had anybody say to me, except when they consciously realized that it technically was short, nobody said it feels short because they listened to it from beginning to end and it feels complete to them as a piece of art. And that's what I want. Like, if it could be longer, if I could do that at some point for 50 minutes, that would be awesome. But I don't foresee that happening anytime soon. The thought of making 50 minutes of music like that, I just think it would take me a long time. And then at that point, I might not even be into it anymore. Like, that's the thing, is like, you have to catch your inspiration when you have it, because, hopefully you're always moving on and growing. So the songs need to match the other songs and the space you're at. If you want to make some crazy long album and you're taking that amount of time with each song, you're running the risk of the later songs not balancing out with the first songs, and then you don't have a cohesive sound as an end product. And then I'll end with this too, as far as having a shorter record not really meaning anything to me, is it's either, in today's day and age, it's either digital or vinyl for the most part, right? And if it's digital, it's just people are picking the song they like, and it's just going on a playlist. So it doesn't even matter. That's why I was like, let me have 8 singles. That's what I was talking about. Each song, I love each song. So it's like, to me, in its own way, it's 8, even though I know they're not singles, you know what I mean? Like, whatever that term carries, they have the strength of singles to me. So it's 8 songs individually stand on their own, although stronger together. Or it's vinyl, where it's like, you put it on, and like, you don't want too many songs on vinyl, because then the fidelity starts to degrade if it starts getting too long. And then it was like 4 on each side. I really like the balance of it. And like I said, when people who are watching this are listening to the record, like, it's meant side A, side B. Like, I thought about it in vinyl terms of like the listening experience, putting that record on. And I think being a vinyl DJ, I had a connection to that I wanted to keep going with that, because putting on a good record, a good vinyl record, that's an awesome experience. And I'm not detracting from it, because digital has its own amazingness. Like I say, like, you could have your own playlist, you could have a million songs, like, there's pros to it. You know what vinyl's like? Vinyl's like riding a horse. It's like, you know what I mean? Like, of course, cars, like, we're not going to just not drive cars anymore. Like, cars are super convenient. They make sense. But like, riding a horse, there's a romance to it.
Yeah.
And it will never not be amazing and special in its own way.
I love that you put that much thought into it, because it really translates for me. And again, being so short and to the point, the first time I listened to the full thing, I immediately wanted to listen to it again. And that was the same thing that happened to me with By the Throat, is that when the last song played out, I was like, wow, it's over. And then it looped, and I was not mad. I was like actually really happy to hear it a second time. And I would so much rather me choose to listen to it again than me look at my watch and go, when is this over? You know?
Exactly. Or you have songs where you're like, damn, track 3 is just a worse version of track 8.
Yeah.
Like, you're making songs that are too similar to one another. Whereas if every song is unique on its own and stands on its own, you will feel fulfilled. That's really what it all comes down to, is each song having enough to be unique that you don't feel the need, like, oh, I need more. If you're making art, it's like, I feel like you have to find a balance between having a concept and a vision, but also being open to where the best path leads you. You know what I mean? And recognizing that path. Like, dude, when I started making any of those songs on there, they all went a new space. You know, I had something going, and I was like, okay, it's gonna be, and then it went somewhere else, you know, and then you have to be willing to go, well, does this sound better than my initial thing that I wanted to do? And if it's yes, then it's like, you got to be open to that and just go on that journey.
Well, I'm really excited for you. It's a great sounding record. And again, just you mentioned the title, Phonograph Phoenix. It really just embodies this comeback and everything that you've been through. And congratulations, man.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
All right, that is our show. Huge thanks to Abilities for taking the time. He was actually one of the very first guests I ever asked to be on this show, and he said yes, but when the record is done. So I've really been waiting years for this, and it was a pleasure. If you want to support the show, take a screenshot, post that to your stories. You can follow me on Instagram at Sammy Warm Hands. You can go to patreon.com/BatFanAddict. That's my other podcast, and it will support me here as well. I'm going to leave you with a song from Phonograph Phoenix. This is DJ Abilities' Mission. Blueprint, Illogic, Superstition, Gift of Gab. My name is Sammy Warm Hands, and these are just a few of the iconic voices featured on my double album, Figures of Speech, available now at take92.com and strangefamous.com. Do you miss live music and going on tour? Check out my new book, How to Ruin Your Life, The Daily Grind of a DIY Tour. The book chronicles nearly a decade of underground tours with artists like DJ Abilities and Christoph Crane. With a foreword by Carnage the Executioner, this book is a must-have for rap fans who want a peek behind the scenes. The book is available now at take92.com and strangefamous.com. For even more behind-the-scenes content, subscribe to the Take 92 podcast for interviews with artists from Sage Francis to Jello Biafra. This is Sammy Warm Hands from Crush Kill Recordings and Take 92 Music.